Welcome to ReSounding, a podcast exploring the power of the arts in advocacy and in action. We talk with artists and activists, taking a deep dive into questions surrounding the causes of displacement, the strength and the vulnerability of people on the move, and the potential of the arts to shine a light on social injustice and to impact people's lives for the better. My name is Laura Hassler, and in this episode I talked to Luciana Abait, an artist who was born in Argentina and migrated to the US in the 90s. She creates multimedia artwork, combining photography, sculpture, and digital art to create pieces that play on audiences' preconceptions of migration and displacement, inviting them to reflect on their own biographies. So, Luciana Abait, welcome very much to ReSounding, the podcast of Art 27. Very delighted to have this conversation with you today.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me. I'm really honored to be here talking with you.
As a kind of migrating or moving world citizen, maybe you could start by telling us about your own journey.
Yes, of course. I was born in Argentina, in the city of Buenos Aires. I moved to the United States in 1997. First, I lived in Miami for 8 years. And in 2005, I moved from Miami to Los Angeles, which is where I now live. I've had my own journey of immigration.
And has that journey pointed you in the direction of some of the themes of your artwork?
Yes, absolutely. My own personal experiences as an immigrant have definitely informed my work. I've been able to create different series of works based on my personal experience. Mm-hmm.
Can you say more about that? I identify with you in this sense because I also immigrated 45 years ago from New York to the Netherlands, and that really influenced my path. Even though it wasn't forced migration, but you know something about what it means to end up somewhere where you're not from.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. What you're saying is really perfect because even though you and I were not forced to migrate, I think there's a certain connection between everybody who has had to leave their own countries, their own land. And there's that sense of having lost something, and we all carry that with us wherever we go. Yeah. So first, well, when I lived in Miami, we were faced every day with the situation of all the people that were escaping, especially from Cuba, and sometimes they were also leaving Haiti, and they were crossing the oceans and trying to reach dry land, especially in Florida. It was a heartbreaking situation to see that every day, people trying to reach the US in any kind of thing that floated. Sometimes you don't necessarily call that a boat. They would just venture into the sea with anything that could float and that could take them to the US. Single people with families. And it was really heartbreaking to see people who were risking their lives, thinking that they could be eaten by sharks. They were risking everything just to try to make it to the US and start a new life. Yeah. So that really made you think about how desperate these people had to be to risk their life in such a manner, to have a better life and a new life. In those times, I created a series of works that were presented paintings of the ocean, and then there were these life preservers floating on the ocean that were red and white. This talked about, even though people were not present in the artwork, they were present through these objects that were floating in the ocean that, of course, refer to human beings. And a life preserver is something that saves us. So it was talking about saving us and rescue. And these life preservers were floating aimlessly in the ocean in a way. They also talked about drifting and solitude, and the solitude of the immigrant. So that's how it all started.
Did you actually use the life preservers in your artwork, or did you paint them, or?
I did. When the first this series that it was actually titled Rescue. It was a painting, so I painted oceans. These life preservers were painted in the oceans, and they were red and white. They had a very surreal quality and theatrical quality as well. Yeah, they had all these emotions adhered to them.
I've seen many photographs of piles of life jackets on Greek beaches and things like that, and also read stories about people being put into boats with life jackets which turn out not to work. I mean, it's a heartbreaking image. It's it's supposed to save lives, and still it's the image of lives risked and lost.
Absolutely, you're totally right. And actually, it's very interesting what you mentioned, because in 2015, what I was already living in Los Angeles, in those times, it was when we started reading about the people who were escaping Syria, and they were trying to cross the Mediterranean and reach Europe. In those times, I applied to an award here in Santa Monica in Los Angeles, and I got the award, and I got to develop this photographic series that is titled Displacement.
Mm-hmm.
In it, again, in a very surreal manner, I explored the situation of all these migrants. The way that I presented it is I created sculpturally with maps, mountains that presented all the countries of Europe and even the Mediterranean. So it was like a landscape created with maps, with paper maps.
I've seen some photographs of those. Those are fabulous. I would love to see that in real life.
Thank you. And then they had these little ladders that were placed on the Mediterranean. They were leaning on the different European countries. And these ladders in these pieces represent people that are trying to reach dry land from the Mediterranean. But also, the mountains in these pieces talk about the hardships. It's not a flat land, but it's a mountain. It's something that is hard to climb, and it's very hard to get to. So it talks about all these hardships and difficulties that immigrants have when they encounter a new country.
And what kind of response do you get to this kind of artwork?
From this series of photographs that I created with maps, I created a real life immersive installation. So the first time that I did it was in 2018 when I did a residency at Building Bridges Art Exchange in Santa Monica. We explored homelessness and immigration, and I covered a whole room with real size mountains of maps. The maps were 12 or 13 feet high. So when spectators stood by them, they could really sense physically the size of a mountain and how hard it was to reach those mountains. And also they could look up and look at some countries that were totally out of reach. So the idea was to make spectators feel as those immigrants who are looking at countries and they feel that they are out of reach. All of this goes to connect with the fact that all the countries that I presented in this immersive installation are all mixed up in no logical order. So maybe the state of Mississippi in the US is next to Kenya. And so it talks about connectivity in this world. We are all connected for good and for bad. And there's no place in this world that is too far not to care. We are all mixed up and connected. And whatever happens in one part of the world will definitely affect another part of the world. It doesn't necessarily talk about one country geographically being next to another. It's how we are globally connected. And this work talked about frontiers and borders. And when people visit this installation, it is very interesting because there are those who have immigrated themselves. Mm-hmm. So they immediately feel the connection. They totally identify with this sense of being off the map. This was the title of the first installation that I created of the map.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the idea of not belonging, the feeling of not belonging. Everybody goes and tries to look for their country of origin or their city of origin. So that's also very interesting how they connect to their past and their belonging, that sense of belonging. And then there are people who maybe have, I've always presented this installation in the US, but even people who were born in the US many times look for their ancestors' place of origin or country of origin. So it's very interesting because we all somehow or other are related to this idea of immigration and of going from one land to another. So it's wonderful to see people connect to it in different manners. There's just always this very emotional connection with the piece.
I saw a map today online somewhere, which was a map of Africa as it was drawn in, I think, 1884 in Berlin, when all of Africa was divided up, and on every what's now a country in Africa was the name of either Germany or France or England, or, and what you were saying and about the ways that people look for the place that they came from, but also the difficulty of getting somewhere else sometime, reminded me a lot of this whole question of borders and nation states, and how, we have powerful forces have always been drawing lines and calling places their own and telling other people that they can't come in forever, And so it's very interesting to use exactly this phenomenon of the map to say something universal about human beings and about sometimes our need to leave somewhere and end up somewhere else. And also about I saw a couple of photographs of the map installations with, look, to me, it said, you see the ladder, of course, you're trying to get out of somewhere, but the mountain's too high. That's what I saw in at least one of them that I saw. It was incredibly moving. But the whole idea about borders and you have maps with lines in them, but you also have maps that are more geographical or geological features of places rather than the lines that people have drawn. Have you done anything with that kind of map?
No, you know what? It's interesting. So far, I've only used maps that have the geographic divisions and they show countries and borders, but my plan is in the future to use other kinds of maps to talk about specifically about different issues. Well, actually, I have used not only these geographic maps, but I have used flying maps. And these are the maps that pilots use to fly.
Oh, interesting.
And they are very interesting because all these maps present areas and these areas are labeled restricted, mark the areas that pilots are not allowed to fly. So I have created another series of photographs where I placed miniature objects like a house, a mattress, a life preserver, and these were toy objects that I placed on the maps, and then I photographed them, and then the artwork is the actual photograph.
Mm-hmm.
The word restricted, that is meant for pilots, I use it as a metaphor for all the restrictions that immigrants face when they're trying to reach a new land and they are not allowed to reach a new land. This is a very fascinating way of using words in a different context, and words that mean so much as restricted. It's like there, as you mentioned, there are so many countries that don't allow immigrants to go into.
Yeah, indeed. And speaking of maps, another big theme of a lot of your work is climate, right? And we were talking earlier about the relationship of between some of these issues, the relationship between climate breakdown and migration, the relationship between war and migration, and the relationship between climate and war, and all of these interrelationships. Can you say something about for example, your Iceberg project?
Yes, of course. So the Iceberg series is a series of mixed media work. So we're not talking about maps that are sculptures. This is two-dimensional works that I create. And these iceberg landscapes are imaginary, and I create them with photographs that I've taken myself, photographs that people send me. So I combine my personal memory to a collective history. I was inspired to create this iceberg series when in 2017 I read an article about a piece of ice that had broken off Antarctica and that was floating aimlessly in the ocean. And scientists were trying to figure out where this piece of ice would end up. I found this image, as tragic as it was, I found it extremely poetic. And I found a parallelism with my own life. That piece of ice drifting in the ocean, I felt like it could be me, drifting in the ocean, going from one location to another, but also trying to find this final destination, that final place to call home. Visually, what I could think of was that this lonely iceberg that was drifting, and I felt my own loneliness throughout this immigration journey. So all these works present icebergs that present this sense of isolation. There's only always one piece of ice floating in a very vast ocean. There's color alteration, and the color alteration intends to symbolize the different moods and states of mind that we go through the immigration process.
And do you have a sense also, at least when I see a photograph of an iceberg these days, it always gives me a chill, not from ice, but from fear that this is another sign of climate breakdown, and that the threat of what humans have been doing to the planet. And is this something that plays in your mind also with this theme?
Yes, absolutely. So as much as the Iceberg series is a very personal series because it deals with my own immigration issues, it also has this very strong layer of an environmental message. And that is actually the first message that people interpret when they look at the work. They see an iceberg and they immediately talk about the melting of ice all over the world. So yeah, it intends to create awareness. The Iceberg series intends to create awareness on environmental issues, but it also, there's another layer where it really deals with my own personal issues as an immigrant. I presented an exhibition in 2019 at Los Angeles International Airport.
Oh, wow.
And it was titled A Letter to the Future. The whole exhibition presented iceberg landscapes. And A Letter to the Future is the title of a poem written by an Icelandic poet and writer. This poem was dedicated to the first iceberg that was lost due to climate change in Iceland. And scientists decided to erect a monument to commemorate this first iceberg that was lost due to climate change. There's a plaque on the monument with this poem written, and it's titled A Letter to the Future. And basically the poem says that in 200 years, all icebergs are going to disappear. And if people in 200 years are able to read this poem and that plaque, means that humanity was able to survive and make it.
Oh, interesting. And that brings me to another question, because you did this exhibition at an airport where thousands of people can see it. And I understand that's also a kind of theme of your work, of putting your work in places outside of only museums so that many, many people can have access to it. Is that right? And does that come from a philosophy, or how do you see that?
I've always been fascinated with being able to create works that are in public places. I love to create monumental works, and the fact that they are in a public space gives you the chance to show your work to a more diverse members of society. Many people can be intimidated to visit a museum or a gallery. And even though museums do so much work trying to bring people over and they have free admission days, but still there's a very big group. There are so many people that are still afraid or they are intimidated to visit a museum. So the fact that the work is outdoors and is accessible to everyone gives these people the opportunity to enjoy art. And my intention with this is to create in everyone, even if it's a second or a few seconds, this moment of contemplation, of introspection, of joy, even of dream when you're looking at a piece of artwork and that artwork transports you to a different place. I'm a believer that art can change the world, and it's like one little thing at a time. Those moments that art can give a person of contemplation, of joy, everything adds up to make a better world. And of course, when I create these pieces, my idea is that they are not only beautiful, but that they have a message. And always the message deals with environmental issues and with immigration, but in more of a sense of feeling empathy about others that are different. And also, the way that I present my work is not through a doom and gloom lens, but I always like to present my work through a lens of hope. It is scientifically proven that if scientists tell people that there's no hope, people will stop trying. But if they do tell people that there is hope, people will continue to fight and try to make a change.
Yeah.
So that's the lens that I try to approach my work. So my works are really colorful and vivid. They are inviting. I really want to invite the public to come and dialogue with my work, and hopefully we can establish a dialogue.
And this is one of the powers of art, isn't it? It's not only the truth telling, which I hear you saying, an artist as truth teller, you talk about saving the world or creating change, but it's also about offering people a different space where hope is accessible, right? Because you're surprised by something, because you suddenly see a window go open, which you hadn't seen before, because there's a connection through this beauty that you're seeing. I often think that just the appreciation of beauty is one of the things that has been so neglected in our culture, and one of the great functions of art is really to put that in front of people.
Yeah.
I was at this demonstration last week, and there were 180 musicians, classical musicians, joining the activists, singing Mozart's Dies Irae, and even when the orchestra was prevented by the police from taking their instruments with them, threatened with having their instruments taken away by the police. So then they sang the orchestral parts, and these 180 musicians, and it just made everybody sort of like, wow, this is amazing. This is, and here we have, in your case, graphic arts, three-dimensional arts, these visual arts telling these stories, and here these were musicians. So it's different, but that same thing about surprise and joy and connection.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I also like to install some of these monumental works in unexpected places of the city, maybe industrial places where when people are walking around, they're not expecting to see this beautiful landscape. So I think that element of surprise and wonder really create a difference. Maybe in people's lives. I mean, as they go about every day doing their daily chores. it's wonderful to find that beautiful surprise as you turn around your corner.
Do you ever get negative reactions from people to your work?
I can tell you that I think I've been very lucky. I've never gotten a negative reaction. It doesn't mean that everybody loves my work. Probably people who are not attracted to my work, who don't like my work, have never expressed that to me. But I've never personally gotten any particularly negative comments about my work.
So you've succeeded in making things that are not threatening to people.
That I think, yeah, you're right about that. I think my work is not, even though it talks about very serious issues, it's not controversial in the way it is presented. So I
Right.
think that it doesn't offend people. It tries to take a very inclusive approach in a way.
And do you, when you make an artwork, do you have a particular audience in mind, or are you're just busy with the subject and you find your audience later, or how does that work?
This is an interesting question. I really don't think I have an audience in mind. I would say I try to present the issues in a way that sound authentic and organic. I don't want to create something that is too fake. I would say that that's what I have in mind. I really want to be true to myself. That's what I would say. I don't have a specific public in mind. I really like my work to be enjoyed by different kinds of people from different socio-economic backgrounds. And also I love the fact my work can be enjoyed by kids and also by people of an older age.
Are you part of a community of artists who work in this way, or are you kind of on your own in Santa Monica?
So I'm part of an organization, for example, that is called Eco Art Space. Its founder and director is Patricia Watts. It gathers artists who deal with environmental issues from all over the world. It is also wonderful to see that there's this global community of artists in different mediums that are trying to deal with these issues and are trying to make a difference.
Mhm. And you connect the issues of migration or forced migration, migration and loss, and climate change. Can you say something about that, about those connections and how you make them and how you think of them?
Yes, of course. Definitely, climate change is accelerating migration and it's forcing migration. Years go by, this is getting worse and worse. All these dramatic climate events, such as droughts and floods, making people lose their homes and everything they have, and they are forced to migrate. Also, droughts lead to losses in agriculture that also lead to famine, and then people again have to leave their homes because there's no food to eat.
Yeah.
Also, access to clean water is another issue because of all the droughts that the planet is experiencing. People are forced to leave their places of origin, basically, because there's no water or there's no access to water.
Yeah.
So all these issues are presented in my work. For example, in this map installation that we were talking about before, showing how, first of all, this map installation presents mountains, and these mountains can also resemble icebergs. So when you look at this installation, you can think, oh, these are icebergs, and icebergs are melting. And this excess of water that is going around the world is one of the main factors of what's happening around. It also talks about the fact that it talks about environmental justice, this installation, because the communities that are more vulnerable in general are the ones that have to migrate because they have no resources.
Yeah.
So this is all presented in this map, and also the fact that no matter where we are all affected by this in one way or of another.
Sooner or later, yes, absolutely.
No matter where we live, we are all part of this problem and this issue.
And art, as you see it, can lead the way in waking people up to this. How do you see it exactly, the function of art then?
I'm going to be very realistic. It's not that I think just with art we're going to change the world in terms of environmental issues and immigration issues, but I think it's all, I mean, we are doing our part, and we are giving our point of view of something that is very big, and we also need all the different disciplines around the world to also give their part. It's not something that we can do on our own, but we are doing what we can from our perspective. What I hope in a more personal level is that when people look at my work or other people's works that deal with environmental issues or immigration issues, is to create a certain awareness. That awareness will lead people to elect the people who govern them in a wiser manner, in a way, because we definitely need our leaders to take drastic measures in order to stop this climate change. We cannot do this on our own. This has to be done at a global level. So we have to make sure that we elect the right leaders and the right governors. So I hope my art and other people's art can do that, to create that awareness.
I hope so. I mean, I think many of us by now would say that whichever politicians we elect, they won't make those decisions that we need unless there's also continuous pressure on them, and that art is one way to keep people active and moving, not just voting, but out on the streets if necessary, and creating things that tell truth and that shift narratives and that bring these issues to the fore and that say these are urgent and you must address them. And I think that's where a lot of people are. I wish we could have your beautiful artworks on the streets here, where there's now a lot of climate activism going on, of more and more people, especially young people, but also of all ages, and I think it's going on. I think I've read in the United States as well, and across Europe anyway. I think there's a lot going on, and I don't think art can solve these things on its own, but I do think it can show the way. I do think it can stimulate people to be active, to become their best selves. And like you were saying, not to feel hopeless, but to feel inspired by what is there, by what is, and by this expression. And I think your work is amazing, and I think it would be wonderful if it can be seen by as many people as possible.
Thank you so much. You're so right about art, about the word stimulating. I think, yeah, that's the word. How art can stimulate people.
Beautiful. Are there any projects, Luciana, that you are active in or developing now that you would like to share with people? Are there things that people can look up online and see your work and what you're active in now?
Well, thank you so much for asking. Well, first of all, I have my website, which is lucianaabait.com. So it's my name.com. And I'm also on Instagram with my name, Luciana Abait. And the projects that are coming up, I'm installing one of my map installations very soon, in the upcoming weeks, at Sur Biennial at the Torrance Art Museum here in California. Sur Biennial is an exhibition, and it's a biennial that presents artists who come from south of the border, of the US border. This exhibition in particular talks about colonialism and how it has shaped our country and our world. I'm also presenting a solo exhibition starting at the end of October until March at the Laguna Art Museum in Laguna Beach. And that exhibition will be titled Escape Route. I'm also presenting my video projection Agua in Abu Dhabi in an outdoor video projection festival that is called Manar, and it will take place in November.
Beautiful, beautiful. Luciana Abait, thank you so much for this conversation, and we will post links to your website and anything else you care to share with on social media.
Thank you so much for giving me the space to talk about my work. I really enjoyed your questions, and I also enjoyed listening to your comments and to your observations about the issue. You are right on point. So thank you so much for this opportunity.
Nice to have found each other. Thank you.
Likewise. Thank you.
ReSounding is brought to you by the Art27 Network, a network of like-minded initiatives using art and culture to respond to the ongoing crisis of displacement of human beings in Europe and around the world. To find out more and to join our growing network, you can visit our website, art27.art, or follow us on Facebook at art27. This podcast was produced and edited by Ed Holland. The theme tune was written by Matteo Galesi in collaboration with SYNCR. Thank you for listening.